So this is a Maimer for Yidal of ניסן in Chelik Gimel in Maimorim Ulakotim. This is the 21st Maimer in the order of the Chelik Gimel. Siyaite Deshmaya Yud Aleph Nisan h'tavshin Lamed Ches, and later on this was published in the Kuntras Yud Aleph Nisan in Tavshin Nun, and that was published, as it said in the introduction there, for the Yom HaBoyer Yud Aleph Nisan. That was at the 88th birthday of the Rebbe, and the publication date was Yud Nisan Shnas Tavshinun. Okay, so the Maimer begins Ki Yish'olcha bincha mochor lemer. When your son asks you mochor, the next day after time, your son asks you, what are these testimonials, these statutes, these laws that Hashem Elokeinu, that God our God commanded you? Of course, we have in the Haggadah, we have the four sons, and each of the Pesukim is associated with a special son. This pasuk is the question of the Ben Chocham. This is the wise son asking this question, because he's asking already intellectual questions over here. What are the Eidus Chukim u'Mishpatim? Shaila Zu, this question, Hishailas haben Chocham. This is the question of the wise son, like it says in the Haggadah. Chocham mahu oimer. What does the Chocham say? Maha edus goimer, quoting this pasuk. This is the pasuk for the Chocham. So really, this is a question: how could we call him the Chocham, the son, when he doesn't even understand the elementary, as we learn by Pashtus? He's asking, what are these Eidus Chukim and Mishpatim, that he doesn't know the difference between Eidus Chukim and Mishpatim. He doesn't know what Eidus Chukim and Mishpatim are. How could you call him a Chochem? What kind of a Chochem is here that he doesn't even know the basic information? It's known, the question in the Maimorim of our Rebbes, our leaders, the Ma'achar shenikra b'shem Chochem, since we call him by the name Kol Machochem. If you say somebody is a Chochem, the Amitis HaChochma, he Chochmas HaTorah. True Chochma is the wisdom of Torah. So if he's a Chochem, meaning that he's wise in Torah, not that he's a Chochem something else. He's a Chochem in Torah. Harehu bevada yedeya es hamitzvos. So if he's a Chochem, for sure he knows mitzvahs. So what is the question? What are these testimonials, these statutes, and the mishpatim? What kind of question is that? He must know what they are. As the Rebbe will explain, that there's a much deeper question over here than just the simple meaning of Eidus Chukim and Mishpatim. The Rebbe says we can add more to that question that we find in the Maimorim. The Mehemshech HaKosuv, that from the continuation of the pasuk, the response that you answer this Chochem Moedus Vachukim, the pasuk continues. It says, "V'amarto levincha goimer," and you say to your son, "Is vayitzavenu havaye lasis es kol hachukim ha'elu." God instructed us to do all these statutes. L'toiv lanu goimer, l'toiv lanu goimer. So it's good for us. That's why we have to do them. So shemevarim. So what is explained over here? What are we explaining? Hamaila shebikiyum hamitzvos, the advantage in fulfillment, in observance of the mitzvah, because we say l'toiv lanu, that is for our good. This is so that it'll be good for us, the mitzvahs. So, since we're saying that the explanation is, we're explaining that it's good for us, it means that the question is, what's the benefit? And we're answering, no, it is a benefit. Move on. So from the answer that we say that the mitzvahs, kol hachukim ha'elu, are for our good, move on. Shapirush moha edus goimer hu. What is he asking the Ben Chochem? What is these edus? Hu mahu inyan ha-mitzvahs. What is the idea of mitzvahs? Meaning, ezu ma'ila yesh bahem. What kind of advantages? Because the answer is yes, it's for our good. Meaning that he asked, why should we do that? But tzarich biur, so we need to explain eich shayich sheben chochem yishal shayla kazu. How does it apply? How does it fitting for a ben chochem to ask what's the benefit of the mitzvahs that we explained to him? That is the tov lonu. He doesn't know what the benefit of the mitzvahs. Besides the whole thing that he's a chochem, he knows about mitzvahs, but it seems like the question from the answer seems like the question is, what's the benefit of the mitzvahs? But if he's a ben chochem, he should know. Why is he asking a question, what's the benefit of the mitzvahs? And the Rebbe says, actually, we're explaining the ben chochem two things. A, you have to do the mitzvahs because Hashem told us to do the mitzvahs. That would be Kabbalah soil. And the second thing is, it's also for our benefit. So, it seems like the son doesn't know. He doesn't know about doing the mitzvahs with Kabbalah soil, and he doesn't know of the benefit. How could we call him a chochem? That's what he asks further. Move on, it's even more not understood. So first he says it seems like his question is, what's the benefit? How could we say that? But if you look specific, it's more not understood. The Bahabiyur be'inyan ha-mitzvahs, when he explains about what mitzvahs are, which is b'hateshuva, the amarto v'amart levincho, that's in the response, tell your son. Over there, he says two things. He says, first of all, Vayitzienu Hashem miMitzrayim Havayim miMitzrayim Gomer Vayitzavenu Gomer Lasis es Kol HaChukim. Hashem took us out of Egypt, so therefore He told us to do all these statutes. Basically, He took us out of Egypt, and we have to listen to Him because otherwise we would still be in Egypt. The Kivon Shahoitzionu miMitzrayim. Since He took us out of Egypt, so therefore we are enslaved to Him to fulfill His mitzvahs. That's one thing. One thing it means we owe it to Hashem. You accept Hashem's kingdom. Hashem took it out. That's Kabbalah. And we tell another thing that we're telling to the son, to the Ben Chochem. There's an additional aspect in fulfilling of the mitzvahs. So this should be good for us for all our days. In other words, that the mitzvahs are beneficial for us. So we're trying to tell the son two things. It's first, we have to accept it, and it's for our benefit. And that means that the son doesn't even know that. The fact that in the response, that which you say to your son, he explained these both aspects of needing to listen to Hashem because He takes us out and because it's also our benefit. Move on, it's understood. That they're both something new, they're a novelty, that we have to explain it to him because that's the answer. So he didn't know that. Move on. So it's not understood. He doesn't, that means that the son doesn't only not know what the benefit is, he doesn't even know that you have to fulfill the mitzvahs with Kabbalah soil because Hashem told us to do so, took us out of Mitzrayim. Move on. So it's not understood. The he has no idea. He doesn't know about mitzvahs. He doesn't only not know that the mitzvahs is for our benefit. But he doesn't even understand the obligation to fulfill the mitzvahs by way of accepting the yoke. How do we call him, describe him as a ben chochem? How do we call him a chochem? He is the ben chochem. He doesn't know, not only doesn't he understand the benefit of the mitzvahs, he doesn't even know that we need to do the mitzvahs because Hashem told us to do the mitzvahs. Okay, so here basically the question is, how could he be a chochem? How could this be a chochem when he doesn't know the basic, the elementary ideas behind Torah mitzvahs? Also, we need to understand, as he asks in the various Maimorim, Masha Omer Asher Tziva Havaya Lekeinu Eschem V'lo Yisonu. Why does he say Hashem, our God, told you? But why doesn't he say Eschem V'lo Yisonu? Why doesn't he say told us? As if to say, so Take, we know in the Haggadah by the Ben Rosha, we're saying over there when it says from the pasuk Lochem, it means you and not him. But here, by the Ben Chochem, it also says Eschem V'lo Yisonu. Now, over here we know that he's not really excluding himself. B'Hagam. By the Ben Chochem, he says Hashem Elikeinu Eschem. So he already says our God. Over there he's just saying Lochem. So although we really understand when he's saying Eschem, he doesn't really mean you and not him. B'Hagam Dal Yidei She'omer Havaya Elikeinu. He says Elikeinu our God. Ein mokim litos, there is no room for a mistake. Shemoitzi chas v'sholem es atzmei mehaklal, that he is taking himself, God forbid, out of the inclusion, that he's not included, like you say, you and not him. Because he already says, Elikeinu, our God, meaning that it's my God too. So he's not saying you as opposed to me, but it means he's also part of it. But still, why use a language of Eschem? We need an explanation. Masha Omer Eschem. Why is it? He should said what Hashem Elokeinu told us. If he's asking about the mitzvahs, why is he saying you and not us? Or perhaps even Hashem Elokeinu. The Hashem is commanded, not Eschem, not Isonu. Just that what Hashem has commanded, v'suloi, nothing more than just Havai Elokeinu. Why add the word Eschem, which could have a possible explanation that it means you and not him? Why write it in such a way? So basically, how could it be a Chochem? And why does it use the word Eschem, you, which could mistakenly be interpreted that it's not him? Yeah, he says Elikeinu, it means he's included, but why say Oison, or just don't say, just say what is Tziva Hashem Elikeinu? Vesula. Unekudas habiyur baze behadrushim. So the point of the explanation of this in the Maimorim is al pi hayedua, based on that which is known, the kiyum hamitzvahs shel ha'oves hoyo be'iker avodah ruchnis. The Maimorim explain that really the question is what is the purpose in the mitzvahs, the practical mitzvahs, is why do we need to do, why is Eschem? Before Matan Torah, the Eibshter we didn't have all the detailed mitzvahs, the way the others, they mainly did the mitzvahs beruchnis. The Maimorim explained that the question of the Ben Chochem is Eschem you, meaning you have now, after Matan Torah, the mitzvahs are very practical, a very gashmistic, physical mitzvahs that we don't do spiritual mitzvahs. A person will have in mind all the kavonas of the matzah, and he's not going to eat the matzah, he's not going to be mekayim the mitzvah. So the question really is, Ma ha'edus eschem you, which means, I mean, the son is asking it after he's sitting by the Seder, I guess, or the Mochar, meaning after the ready Matan Torah, he's asking the question, what's the point in mitzvahs ma'asis? The main aspect of the mitzvahs of the forefathers was spiritual. And the act that they did physically, you find various different avoiders that they did also begashmi, like the avoider with the tzoin lovan, with the tzoin hoysa, that was tefillin, that hoysa ke'ein kli laha avoider haruchnis. That was such a vessel for the spiritual. It was mainly a spiritual, but a container, a vessel for the spiritual avodah. It expressed itself somewhat in gashmis. However, what happened by Matan Torah, mitzvahs, and then the mitzvahs, on the other hand, shenitnu b'Matan Torah, that were given by Matan Torah, ikram hu ha'asiyah b'poyel, the main mitzvahs is doing them, actually doing them. The asiyahs ha-mitzvah, doing of the mitzvah, hiloi hachona v'keli lekavanosa. Doing the mitzvah is not like it used to be by the others, a preparation and a vessel for the kavanah, for the spiritual of the mitzvah, the intent of the mitzvah. But the contrary, the main thing is the doing. Let's take our case. We're talking about matzah. That's what the Ben Chochem is sitting by the Seder is asking. Mitzvah is achilas matzah, the mitzvah of eating matzah. The kasher yikaven besoid mitzvahs matzah. If he's going to have the kavona, the secret of the mitzvah matzah. The chaz v'sholem yechser hapoel mamish. And God forbid he will be lacking the actual. Lo yamshich me'uma. He will not bring down anything. He's not going to be mamshich anything that you're supposed to be mamshich. You're wasting your time. You could have all the kavonas, but you're not mamshich what you're supposed to. And on the other hand, when you fulfill the mitzvah, actually, even if you don't have any kavona, you bring down the light. So the question of the wise son is, he's asking about our mitzvahs. Eich mamshichim gilui oirin sof alidei maisa ha-mitzvahs. How do we bring down the revelation of the Ein Sof through the act of mitzvahs? How does action, the maisa ha-mitzvahs, bring down Ein Sof? And that's what he says. Eschem dafke, you, meaning because you are doing mitzvahs b'maisis. The kivon shahavoida shalochem. Since your work, which is la'achrei matan Torah, he asiyam, is doing his action And it is not a spiritual avodah like the service of the forefathers. How is the revelation of the infinite light extended through this kind of a physical act? You're eating matzah and you're mamshich ein sof. How is that connection? Vatshuva, so what's the answer? V'amarta levincha, you tell your son, avodim hoyinu lepare b'mitzrayim vayetzienu havaya mimitzrayim vayitzavenu havaya lasis et kol hachukim ha'ela gomer. So what is the answer? The answer here is like this, that we were in Golus Mitzrayim. The Golus Mitzrayim, v'yitzias Mitzrayim, hoyu hachona l'matan Torah. We were slaves and Hashem was taking us out. And then that prepared us. Vayitzavenu Hashem lasis et kol hachukim ha'ela hi matan Torah. Ubematan Torah niten hakoyach. By matan Torah, the power was given. Shal yidei mitzvahs ma'asiyos, that through mitzvahs that are in action, as the pasuk says, "Vayitzavenu havaya la'aseis es kol hachukim gomer la'aseis davke," to do when the Eibishter says to do the mitzvahs. The Eibishter at that point commanded us to do, gave us the koyach. Yamshichu hamshoches l'mayla yoser meha hamshoches shemshichu ha'avis al yidei avodah ruchni shalem. That we should bring down hamshoches even greater. Not only can we do the mitzvahs and the mitzvahs begashmis are mamshech ein sof, but the yidden through lasis. And that's why it said by Tzavenu lasis, through Asiya, because it's davke through the Asiya. That's why it changed, because now through Asiya, it's not sufficient anymore the way the Aves did it, which was only to a certain level. But now by mitzvah, by Matan Torah, the koyach was given. Las yamshich hamshochas lemayla yoser meha hamshochas shehimshichu ha'aves al yidei avodah ruchni shalom, more, even more than the forefathers brought down through their spiritual avodah. V'ad l'hamshochas ha'atzvus, so far until you can actually bring down atzvus. Okay, so this explains that the question of the Chacham was why mitzvahs ma'asiyos, and the answer is we went out of Mitzrayim to get Matan Torah, and by Matan Torah is the special koyach that the Eibishter is given, that we actually in Maisa and we get even higher. Okay? So, but still, the Rebbe asks, we still need to understand, why does it have to say Eschem? It could have said Oisonu, us, meaning, yeah, we're talking about what is the new, but Mitzvahs Maisius is not only for the parents, the son too is, the Ben Chacham is also doing Mitzvahs with Maisius. Why does it say Eschem? It could still say Oisonu. That doesn't really answer fully. And then the Rebbe will ask further question about Eidus Chukim and Mishpatim. Based, let's look inside. Tzorich lahavin, we need to understand the L'chayre. Biur hanal sheshaylas haben Chacham. Hi ala mitzvah shel achrei matan Torah davke. This explanation of above, that the question of the Ben Chacham is about the mitzvahs that are after matan Torah davke. Hu biur rak al zeh. It only explains after saying Ashiva Hashem Elokeinu, he doesn't stop and say, because he's trying to emphasize that now it's b'maisa. He says eschem b'chdei lahadgish, to emphasize sheshalosei, that his questioning loy al hamitzvahs the ha'avos is not in the mitzvah of the forefathers. Ki im al hamitzvahs asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu eschem la'achrei matan Torah, but on the mitzvahs that Hashem has told you after matan Torah. He doesn't want to just leave it b'asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu to tell us that you were told after matan Torah. But that would be understood. It seems, if you would have said it in a more inclusive language, that Hashem has told us he would include himself, us, after Matan Torah. Why does he have to say Eschem? Okay, yeah, he doesn't want to just say Tziva Hashem Elokeinu, so we should understand that there's a difference, but not say Eschem, you should say Eson. Also, we have to understand the details of here. When he says that he specifies edus chukim mishpatim. Since we're explaining now, he al klolus mitzvahs, which is asking on mitzvahs in general, why do we do them in mitzvahs? What are the mitzvahs? Why does he go through Moha Edrus Vachukim Mishpatim? It's a question about mitzvahs. Why are mitzvahs begashmis? Why are they asiya? Why does he detail the Edus Chukim Mishpatim? Ubefrat, especially this whole difference of Edus Chukim Mishpatim is just the fulfillment in mitzvahs maisius. There's no difference which mitzvah, whether the mitzvah is a testimony or it's a mitzvah is a statue or it's a mishpatim. It's the same act. The actions you do of all the mitzvahs is the same. The difference between edus chukim mishpatim is the idea why we do the mitzvahs, whether it's logical, it's a testimony, or it's a statue, it's a chukah, it's a gzeru gazarti, but why, since the question is why we do mitzvahs maisius, the mitzvahs maisius part of the mitzvah doesn't make a difference. Why specify edus chukim mishpatim? Ubefrat, especially shachiluk de hasugim edus chukim mishpatim, the difference of these categories, the mitzvahs that are edus testimonials, or chukim that are statutes, or mishpatim that are the laws, the reasonable laws, who bekavonas ha-mitzvahs. It's just the intent of the mitzvah, the performance of the mitzvah, the ma'ases, and everything the same. Shah-mitzvahs, what's the difference? Shah-mitzvahs, the chukim tzarich lekaimom mipnei shem tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The mitzvah of chukim, you need to fulfill them because they're God's command. Gezeira gazarti, I've decreed. Va-mitzvahs de'edus u'mishpatim, and the mitzvahs that are testimonials and logical, tzarich l'kaimam gam mitzadatam. You have to also fulfill them because there's a reason for that. So the difference is in how to perform the mitzvah. But v'hashayla mo ha'edus. But what is the question as explained? What is the chacham really asking, Gomer? He wants to know why we need the act of the mitzvahs, but in the act of the mitzvah, there's no difference. So why specify Eidus Chukim Mishpatim? The Maisa doesn't connect to, doesn't make a difference. Should have said, what are these mitzvahs? And also, to compare and see that in the answer to the Ben Chochim, it just says Chukim, and in the question is asking about all three. Gam tzarich lahavin. Another thing we need to understand. Yeshaylas haben, the question of this son, he al kol gimul asugim the mitzvahs. He's asking about all three categories. Eidus chukim mishpatim. He's saying moha eidus chukim mishpatim. Ubahat shuva, but in the response, vayitzaveinu goimer lasis es kol achukim. Goimer maskirak chukim. Over there is just mentioning chukim. Why is he only saying chukim here? The question was asked about all three. It's another issue. Gam tzarich lahavin, also we need to understand. The achiluk begimul asugim edus chukim and mishpatim hu. Now, what's the difference in the three categories of edus chukim mishpatim here? Shemishpatim heima mitzvahs shemchiyovim mitzad haseichel. Mishpatim are mitzvahs that one is also obligated to do them logically because intellectually you understand. Come on, for example, what's a example of a logical mitzvah? Gezel, not to steal. Geneva, to rob or to steal. Kibud Avaim, honoring one's father and mother. And what's edus? Huem mitzvahs shehem ois v'zikorin. Those are mitzvahs that are a sign and remembering an event. That's a commemorative. Kamoi, for example, Shabbos reminds us of the creation. Shiva Seishes Yom also, the Eibster created the world 6 days, rested on the 7th day. Pesach reminds us of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Sukkah reminds us that the Yidden were in the desert, but Sukkahs. Utefillin, that the Eibster took us out. Oisal Yotcha should be our Zikor Benenecha. The Parshias of Shema. The mitzvahs elu, these mitzvahs, hagam shaseichel mitzad atzmei. Logically, why would we do the tefillin? Why would we do Shabbos? It's not something we would do. Lule tzivu HaTorah, not if the Torah not commanded us, lo hoya mechaybom. That would not dictate them. The seichel does not dictate these mitzvahs. Udeloika mitzvahs the mishpatim. This edus is not like mishpatim shel gam ilmole nitno Torah. But the Gemara says, had the Torah not been given, we would know that modesty we learn from a chasul, the way the chasul behaves in a modest way, and stealing we would learn from a ant which works hard and doesn't steal. So the difference between edus and mishpatim, they're both logical. But the logic of commemorating, we don't know. The Torah tells us to commemorate. Once the Torah tells us to commemorate, we know it. But on our own, we wouldn't know it. The laws of Mishpatim, even if the Torah wouldn't have told us, we would have figured it out. We would see the way a cat behaves, we see the way the ant behaves, and we would learn modesty and gezela. Okay? But these two mitzvahs are still considered to be both logical, even though the edus, the Torah needs to tell us about it. We wouldn't do it, just remember Shabbos or something without the Torah telling us. But once the Torah has commanded, the mind agrees to it to say, okay, this is reasonable. We should commemorate Shabbos, and we should make Pesach, we should make the Tefillin. But the chukim hema mitzvahs. But chukim are the mitzvahs. Shagam la'achrei sha'Torah tzivsa aleim. Even after the Torah commanded them, ein lemokum b'seichel. There's still no room in one's intellect. Why do we do that? Ve'emrak v'derech chukah chokakti v'gzeira gozarti. And it's all in a way of, this is a statue that I've engraved. I've made this decree, you got to listen to it. So if you start from logic, the first is mishpatim, then comes edus, and then comes chukim. If you start from above logic, first comes chukim, and then comes edus, and then comes mishpatim. But the order in the parsha over here, when he tells him, when he's asking, he starts with Moha Edus. Edus is the middle one. And then he goes to the Chukim, to the totally irrational. And then he goes back to the Mishpatim, very rational. He should have either said Mishpatim Edus v'Chukim, which is Beseda de Milmat L'mayla, from below, logical, and then Edus, and then Chukim. Or Chukim Edus and Mishpatim. You should say Seder L'mayla L'mayla. But the way it's in the pasuk, who edus chukim u'mishpat. So the Rebbe, why is the Rebbe is asking the additional question? Why is it set up Eidus Chukim u'Mishpatim in this way? And Bechlal, the Rebbe asks why asks about Eidus Chukim u'Mishpatim if the main question is about why are we doing mitzvahs, the action, it doesn't make a difference. Eidus Chukim u'Mishpatim are only in the svara, why we're doing it. So the Rebbe asks, so why does he have to enumerate in the question Moedus Chukim u'Mishpatim, and in the answer he just talks about Chukim. So that also needs to be explained. And also, why still does it say Hashem Elokeinu Eschem? It would seem like it would be more reasonable to say Oisonu to include. If he wants to emphasize, the question is after Matan Torah, where the mitzvahs are mainly b'maisa, he doesn't have to say Eschem. He can say Oisonu, which would also include himself. Why does he say in the way of Eschem? Okay, it will be mamshich from here later on.
Thank you very much. See you next time. Good Shabbos.